So then, the scene is set. Whether you are watching in Christchurch or Coos Hill, Seattle or Skibbereen, you are very welcome to the final of the 127th All-Ireland Hurling Championship.
Back out as far as John O'Dwyer, and John O'Dwyer strikes this one inch perfect, and that's straight over for his 6th. And they're still alive, there's still a pulse. Does any team deserve to lose it?
I don't think so.
All heart and determination. Dwyer, tight angle, he's got it, he's nailed it. The 7th, the teams are level.
Sides are level! Sides are level, incredible over the last couple of minutes.
Brian Hogan, will he be the hero? Hogan goes in shouldered by Paddy Marr, and it's a free to Tipperary.
I think it was hit with a fair shoulder.
It's John O'Dwyer. Bubbles, they all call him.
I think he has the distance.
Strikes it high. He's put it wide. No, they're not sure. They're not sure. It's going for Hawkeye.
He has it. Has he? Oh. No, he hasn't. The ball is wide. Oh, and John Bubbles O'Dwyer has not. The umpire's calling again for Hawkeye. The same umpire. This is the 3rd time today.
So Hawkeye's got to determine whether that's a hit or a miss. Is it a score for Tipp?
White.
It's white. It's white.
The drama. If you're a script writer, well, whoever wrote the script for the 2014 All-Ireland, well, God bless you, because you're giving us a game that we will never forget. And ladies and gentlemen, from Ireland, from all over the world, the full-time whistle is blown, and it is another draw.
Yep. You are welcome along to the Classic Game Club, the show where we go back and watch epic sports events from the past. This is like a book club, except for classic games. As you've heard there, on this week's edition, we're looking back at the 2014 Drawn All-Ireland final between Kilkenny and Tipperary. The Hawkeye Final, really. Everybody knows what you're talking about when you say the Hawkeye Final. Ger is still with us. John Duggan, you're there. Good morning.
Eoin Ger, good morning.
You've often said this is the best sporting event you've ever been at, or at least the best hurling game you've ever seen.
The best hurling game I've ever seen, Owen, and it's funny that I would describe it as hurling is the definition of freedom, and at a very worrying time when public health is the priority, and our freedom is a bit different to what it normally is. I think that we really appreciate even watching the game back and the days that are going to come when we're going to have these kind of hurling matches again. So I just was even when I was watching the game last night, I was in the middle of like, oh, hit it. Watching a YouTube replay of a hurling match from 2014, and I was there on the day. I was reporting for Today FM on the game, and to have an organisation that would have been described maybe as behind the times for many years, and that had a timekeeping issue in 1998 with the Clare Offaly game that had to be just replayed because the time was wrong. To see it go to technology and to see 82,000 people look at a screen to see how the All-Ireland would be decided between Kilkenny and Tipperary after 54 scores in the game was just incredible.
What have you got? You've got your match ticket from today, I think. Have you got any other memorabilia?
Well, behind me, I've got a signed Kilkenny jersey because at the time at Today FM, we were doing this competition called the 15 for 15. We were trying to get the listeners to identify the best 15 hurlers of the last 15 years. So we were intending on holding the ceremony the Friday after the All-Ireland final. And it involved, obviously, some Kilkenny players like Tommy Walsh, like JJ Delaney, that were in the team that had been picked. And I would never in a million years would have expected another draw, because the previous 2 years had been draws, and there hadn't been a draw until 2012 since 1959. So understandably, the Kilkenny players weren't at the lunch that obviously we're now training for a replay. But then a few weeks later, unexpectedly in the post, and Derek Ling, I think, had a lot to do with this, and I always found Derek a great fella. They sent in a signed jersey to me from the whole panel, and Brian Cody and Henry Shefflin and everybody. It was a lovely touch, and I still have it today. And obviously I'm not going to wear it because I'm a Clare hurling fan, but it's behind me on the wall here at home.
Ger, where were you for this?
Definitely at the game. I'm pretty sure I wasn't working. I'm pretty sure I watched this game with my folks. That's my recollection of it. I was working for the replay because I remember being in the press box for that and going down and interviewing Jackie Tyrrell afterwards. And the difference, I mean, so we've obviously talked a good bit about the difference between these two games and how the first day, the Tipp forwards completely bamboozled the Kilkenny defence. And the second day, the Kilkenny defence is completely different, and they have a completely different mindset where they go out and they go man to man. So they play zonal in that first game, and that's why, if you're listening to Michael Duggan's commentary, he's constantly talking about the changes that the Tipp forwards are making and how they were just in Kilkenny's heads because they absolutely ripped them apart. Like, the amount of goal chances that Tipperary created but didn't actually take is off the charts when you consider this is a defence which is one of the greatest defences of all time, and these players are still close enough to their peak. But I remember interviewing Jackie on the pitch the next for the second game, and his team name in our Dynasty Fantasy League is called Shutdown Corner. Which is obviously because he's a quarterback, and I was like, "You weren't watching a shutdown corner last week," and he laughed. So that was my recollection. I did that for a bet. I'm not lying.
At least you got a laugh out of it. That is one of the most striking things about this is how to actually follow Duggan and what he's saying constantly throughout this commentary. It is unbelievably frantic in terms of all the changes that happened mid-game. Like, even at one point, Ger Gilroy is like, well, try and follow that. If you're not at the game, like, in fairness to him, Duggan does such a good job of trying to actually paint a picture of what is going on outside of shot. But I'd say, John, even being there, trying to follow the matchups, trying to follow what's actually going on was insane.
Yeah, because the way I kind of approach a hurling match when I'm reporting on it, I draw on a kind of a rule margin fool's cap, a line down the centre, and I've got one team on the left, one team on the right, and then I just have the amount of scores, like 1 point to 0, 1 point, how many wides, etc. And it was just trying to keep up and trying to, because you think, oh, okay, the incidents in the first half will be something that would normally maybe fit an entire game. Like in 1995, Clare beat Offaly by 113 to 2-8. At halftime in this final, it was Tipperary 113, Kilkenny 111. And it's just trying to keep it even on top of that was mad. And I just remember during watching it, I'm going, this is breathtaking, because every time Richie Hogan and John O'Dwyer from either side got the ball, it was over the bar like lightning. The game had a Niagara Falls flow. It was just end to end. It was just incredible. And what I will always say about the game is there was no wides between the 44th and the 72nd minute when John O'Dwyer, Bubbles O'Dwyer's attempt from 97 metres just missed. And that just showed to me how incredible the quality of the match.
We want to get into a few of the different categories that we do here in the Classic Game Club, and I dare say a moment of the match is going to take us quite some time. So before we get into that, just to get through the context of this game, the full picture before we get into it, really, I think there's no question that you had in 2014 the two best teams in the country, and it was the two of them ahead of the pack by a bit of a distance, despite the fact of what we'd seen in 2013. Obviously, an incredible year of hurling. Clare prevailing, perhaps an opinion out there that we had this new powerhouse, a young Clare team ready to dominate hurling. Not to be the case. We saw this early doors in 2014, league final, another unbelievable game between Kilkenny and Tipp. That's the one that goes to extra time. Kilkenny edged them in the end in that one. Come the summertime then, Kilkenny in full flow, really. They win Leinster, they hammer Dublin in the provincial decider. But it's not all plain sailing for Tipperary, if you'll remember. They lost on their first day out at home at Semple Stadium against Limerick. They go down to Tipperary and actually beat them. But it kind of launches a bit of a backlash. Tipperary come through the qualifiers. They beat Galway in that July cracker, 325 to 413. Then Offaly go by the wayside. Dublin are swatted aside pretty easily, and Cork are beaten, and Tipp are back in the All-Ireland. Kilkenny then, it's that game in the rain against Limerick, which I'm sure we'll all remember, in 2014, which gets them back to the All-Ireland. Just to go through the teams, for anybody who might have been watching this game, Kilkenny, there was a bit of a debate around goalkeepers for both sides. Kilkenny went for Eoin Murphy in goal on the day, a full backline of Paul Murphy, JJ Delaney and Jackie Tyrrell. Joey Holden, Brian Hogan and Killian Buckley were their half-backs. And then in midfield, they started with Richie Hogan and Conor Fogarty. Like a pivotal moment then in the second half would be Richie Hogan moving to half forward. Michael Fennelly was wearing the 10 jersey, but of course he would move back to midfield eventually. Colin Fennelly and TJ Reid, the other half forwards. Walter Walsh, Richie Power and Owen Larkin made up the full forward line. Then for Tipperary on the day, it was Darren Gleeson between the sticks, Carl Barrett, Paul McMaher and Paddy Stapleton, their full back line. Captain Brendan Maher lined out at half-back alongside James Barry and Kieran Bergen, with Shane McGrath and James Woodlock in midfield. He then had a half-forward line of Gearóid Ryan, Bonner Maher and John Bubbles O'Dwyer, and then Noel McGrath, Seamus Callanan and Lara Corbett in the full forward line. Like, it's an unbelievable array of talent here. Like, Jerry, you say it's a lot of these players from the golden era of Kilkenny still in their pomp, and I guess you're coming off the back of a great Tipperary team as well. I just think it's the perfect blend between the two, where you have the likes of Corbett and Callanan both dovetailing beautifully with each other in terms of form and in terms of talent at this moment.
Yeah, Jason Ford comes off the bench like he must have been a child at that point. First touch straight over the bar from like 100 metres out. You're like, what the hell? Like, and he was the fourth sub, I think, used, maybe the third sub used. But I want to talk about Richie Power. Was the game against Limerick, the semi-final, was that a Richie Power opus as well? Was he sensational that day? Did he score 2 goals in the rain? I can look that up, but I thought watching it that there was nobody in world sports that reminded me of that Richie Power performance more than Leo Messi, where he's not running. All around him there's chaos. And Richie Power would stop, the game would continue and the ball would come to him in some instances. And I just thought the first goal that he scores is like, oh, it's just a little tap-in, but it's a sensational bit of nuance and understanding of space and where the goalkeeper is. And you see several other players get in one-on-one on the goalkeeper, and the goalkeeper comes and kills them or cleans them out or makes a save with a hand, but not when it's Richie Power. He's like, I know exactly what you're going to do. I can see you coming towards me here, and I'm just going to drop the shoulder and tap it in. Like, it was that. There was another, the ball that he plays to himself for the second goal is unbelievable. It's like, I'm just going to tap this down to myself, to the only space that I know that nobody else is going to be here, and then the finish was glorious as well. So
it's interesting. Like, I've made the exact same comparison. I've got Lionel Messi written down on my sheet here, but it's more Messi and Suarez from that first goal, and I don't even know what the specific comparison is. Like, it's not like a big man up front like TJ Reid who wins the ball for that first goal. It's just the tic-tacking between a front two, and TJ Reid's hand pass for that first goal is actually unbelievable because he's got 3 tip men around him, and somehow he manages to get a limb free and get the ball through to Richie Power, who dinks the ball over Gleeson and into the back of the net. Like, we can get into our moments of the match now, because that up for me is right up there. That Kilkenny opening goal, I just think I totally forgot how great it was, and I think even in commentary, there's not an instantaneous appreciation for how amazing this is or what they've just seen. Like, I think the first Tipperary goal is unbelievable. The second Tipperary goal is unbelievable. Richie Power's second goal is amazing. That we'd almost kind of got to this level where everything we were seeing seemed normal, but it was anything but normal. It was utterly extraordinary. And I just thought Richie Power was amazing on this occasion.
Well, he threaded the needle, TJ Reid, and it really came at a critical time, because Kilkenny were on the rack before that goal. Bonner Maher had put it in the net, and Tipperary had their tails up. And when Tipperary is a team, as we've just seen in the last All-Ireland, play like that, they can be very hard to stop. So the goal came at exactly the right time. And it was an amazing hand pass from TJ Reid to Richie Power. And to me, goals won the All-Ireland that year for Kilkenny. They got 2 in the semi-final against Limerick, who didn't score a goal. They got 3 in the final against Tipperary, who had more possession and more scores from play. And then they got another 2, Richie and John Power, in the replay. And it's funny because we all, think about these things and watch these things, and then, well, that looks like Messi or Suarez. And even when I was looking at the TJ Reid goal at the start of the second half, I was thinking of Gerd Muller in 1974 for West Germany, that he completely turned and then he wrong-footed everybody and then just swept it into the net. And that, once again, killed Tipperary's momentum. Tipperary had Big Mo going into the second half, 2-point lead. First attack of the second half, back of the net, and Kilkenny are ahead. And that is why Kilkenny were the Manchester United. They were the Germans of hurling, that they always, at the right time, went for the jugular. And they had an array of people to do it. It'd be Owen Larkin one day, Colin Fennelly another day, Richie Power on this day, TJ Reid. And that's why, to me, they won the All-Ireland that year. They should not have won.
I really wanted that Tipperary team to win an All-Ireland, because I just thought that what their manager was trying to do was so different and brilliant. And I thought Eamon O'Shea like it was kind of like one of those. It's the lost ring for. It might have changed the way everybody thought about forward play, and just his ability to coax that performance from Lar at that stage of Lar's career was absolutely sensational. But let's not forget that Tipperary missed 2 penalties, and the Tipperary got 2 penalties because of 2 professional fouls from the defenders in this Kilkenny setup, who are absolutely on the outer limit of what is allowed and what's not allowed, and they're just backing themselves because they know they've got Richie Hogan and TJ Reid to go in and stand on the goal line. It's like they fully understand exactly what the rules are. Duggan references it after the second penalty save. He's like, look, this is going to reignite the debate about what's right and what's wrong when it comes to having 3 lads on the line for a penalty. When you look back at it, you're like, what? How did that happen?
And in fairness, they're not, the first penalty in particular is poor. Like you're almost better off taking your points at this stage of hurling.
Well,
and like,
yes, at that stage it would have been a 6-point lead, and he wouldn't have missed a penalty. If he'd stood up and tapped it over the bar, it would have been like, yeah, come on. But like you can see, if you're Callanan as well, you're Seamus Callanan, you're going, yeah, I am going to score this.
Yeah, like we'll get into the trends in a moment, but like that was the summer of the Anthony Nash rule. Like this was very en vogue that you would have 2 penalties in an All Ireland, and in a game, John, I'm sure you'll correct me on the statistics here or give me the statistic here, but the lack of frees throughout the entire thing, like you talk about the accuracy from play, but like the vast majority of these scores, way above average, would come from play. There wasn't actually a lot of fouling, except when Kilkenny needed to, except when they needed to drag the man down. But like, were either of these actual penalties, though, is the question I would have as well. Like, I think both fouls actually occurred outside of the box, but they knew exactly what they were doing. They knew that this is the time to foul because there was every chance that they would be able to save the penalty, and that's exactly what they did. I'm going to give this to you as a potential moment of the match. 15 minutes in, Noel McGrath's point from 50 metres out. The reason why I think that this is just up there as one of the moments of the match, it's because Tipperary goal point up on this occasion, but it's after Owen Larkin is going to the referee, pointing in his face, saying, I should have got the free in. Now, in fairness, he should have got the free in on this occasion, but the point goes over. The Tip crowd are getting unbelievably rowdy at this point. I think Lara was just after getting one of his first involvements in the game. And I think it's at that moment, lads, when everybody kind of turns around to themselves and are like, okay, this game is going to be something special. There is something in the air today. This is going to be nip and tuck for the entire duration of the match. And I just thought that one score, that one moment, Owen Larkin getting angry, an icon of Kilkenny hurling getting angry at the referee at that point, you kind of knew that you were in for something special.
It was one of it started slow, the game. When I'm looking back last night, I'm kind of thinking, well, I'm waiting for this to get into gear, and then when it gets into gear, you're feeling that you're beginning to enjoy it, watching it back. And then from the moment you begin to enjoy it around like halfway through the first half, then you're completely engrossed and enthralled for the whole rest of the game. And that's what just completely reminded me of being back there, and like almost like bringing me back in like quantum leap style, the portal back into Croke Park in 2014 on that beautiful sunny day. And penalties wise, I think Ger's right. I think that attackers were actually at a disadvantage that year. Because like when I'm looking back at Callanan on the replay last night, I'm thinking to myself, he's really, really far back. And he actually hit it into the ground and it was saved. And of course, the rule has changed now. But Henry Shefflin in 2012 in the Galway match, the greatest performance I've ever seen from a hurler in a match individually, had a penalty and put it over the bar. So maybe Tipperary should have been putting these things over the bar. A lot of chances in the second half. Lar Corbett goal chance off the bar. Garrod Ryan goal chance. And I'm thinking to myself, maybe the percentage was the right play, because Kilkenny squeezed the percentages out of everything they did every time they played in All Irelands, especially in the replay, but in this game as well.
Which Owen Larkin moment was a few, Owen? Sorry, because there was a few. What happened?
When he's roaring at the referee.
For which time, though? Was it the time that he gets rugby tackled and then...
15 minutes in, when Noel McGrath has just put Tipperary 6 points to 5 up. And it's not so much what Owen Larkin is doing, it's just so much, it's all to do with how the crowd reacts and how I think McGrath celebrates after he scores the point, and you just kind of realise that's kind of like the start button. You've activated the All-Ireland final in that moment.
I thought Larkin was sensational in that first half, like absolutely sensational, and was accused of diving when he got his head taken off, high tackle, which nowadays might actually even be a red card because it's a high tackle. And then there was the second one where they played advantage after he'd just been poleaxed in two, and still went and caught the next ball over his head, and I think might have tapped it over for a point. I thought he was absolutely sensational in that first half. those Kilkenny forwards in that first half were unbelievable, and they were 2 points down at half-time.
But like, this is the thing. Who were actually the best forwards on show that day? Like, you're kind of thinking to yourself, and I really believe, I actually kind of go against you on that one completely. If you're thinking about a forward unit at halftime in that All-Ireland final in 2014, you're thinking about Tipperary's forwards. You're thinking about, is this up there with, I don't want to go too far here, but is this up there with 2010 in terms of a great performance from a bunch of forwards for Tipperary? Is it up there in terms of one of the great forward units in terms of their performances in an All-Ireland final since Tipperary 2010? Granted, I guess 2010 was more of an individual performance, but you're just looking around to yourself thinking, how is this a situation where Tipperary or where Kilkenny are only a couple of points behind, which kind of perhaps plays more into your point that under the radar, a lot of these Kilkenny forwards are having great games. TJ was having a great game quietly in the first half. Larkin started the game well, perhaps faded out in the second quarter. But everybody was thinking, I thought, about Tipperary. The halftime analysis was all about Tipperary, about Lar, about Callanan, about Bubbles, and how they'd started this game so well. And yet, despite one of these unbelievable forward displays, it was still very much a contest at halftime, which is just the greatness of Kilkenny, really. And it's also one of these strange contradictions we have from this game, is that pick out a Kilkenny pick out a Kilkenny defender who had a bad game. I don't think you can. I don't think you can pick out.
I would say Brian Hogan didn't have the best of days. I would say he didn't have the best of days.
I suppose he got pulled out of position quite a bit, didn't he? And he was on him. It was Lara on him when Lara was at centre forward, and he was kind of pulling Brian Hogan out of position. I'll give you that in fairness. But outside of that,
I thought he did all right. He got completely shafted and dropped for the replay. Like, a couple of the defenders ended up getting dropped. Porrick Walsh comes in, and Kieran Joyce comes in, who starts centre back and ends up winning man of the match in the replay. Yeah. Not a hint of him being on the team for this game.
Yeah, Cody'd former that with Walter Walsh as well in 2012. And we're talking about players that maybe didn't perform to the utter expectations of what they normally would, and that's the thing. And therefore, if Brian Cody makes what would be seen as a tough decision, then it's a spotlight on that person. He just got caught for the first goal for Bonner-Marr. I think about half times and all that. I think generally in hurling matches, it's all about how far or how close you are at half time. I think the first half generally sets the tone, but it's the second half is when you really see the game, in my view. And that's why you had 28 minutes without a wide. And Kilkenny in the second half did not have one wide, not a single wide. From what I remember on the day, the best performances clearly for me were Richie Hogan and John O'Dwyer, because generally every time the ball was in their love, it was over the bar.
Any more moments here, John, that we're forgetting in terms of your moments of the match?
Well, obviously there was one moment of the match we'll get to, which is the Hawkeye moment. I think the TJ Reid goal at the start of the second half was crucial. That was a huge moment. Kind of going through it here, just the penalties being missed, and just really the way I felt that, like, defenders like Cathal Barrett and Paul Murphy played for each team. I think they had excellent games, and I think the moment of the match that would have been really, really controversial if John O'Dwyer's last minute effort had gone over was the fact that it was never in a foul in the first place, and Brian Hogan didn't foul his opponent, Porrick Marr. And it should never have been given.
Paddy Saint not getting sent off for the face mask and then popping up down the other end. He was a man possessed after not getting sent off. Was like, okay, got out of jail. I'm going to play the best 15 minutes of my life here. Popping up left corner forward, hitting a point. Had a great block down, had an amazing tackle. Just had this surge of energy. I'm living my best life right now. I shouldn't even be here. And Richie Power did his very best to look at the face mask. He grabbed the face mask. Somebody else comes over to the referee to go, that was a face mask, should have been sent off. And Colin Fenley ends up pushing him out of the way, going, shut up, shut up. There was this kind of little mad subplot for a minute and a half. And obviously, Paddy's like, right, well, maybe today's going to be my day. Because it looked like it. And he sees this moment really well. I thought that was great. Lar hitting the post, I literally gasped last night when it happened. I had completely forgotten about it. I was like, ah! Like the way you're not supposed to when you're watching something for the second time. It's supposed to be considered. I thought Lar was balletic. I thought that his hand passing, there was one that went awry, but the rest of his hand passing was so slick and beautiful, and the ability to run with the ball fully extended in the hurl. Normally, people are kind of soloing it close to them. Not Lar. He's like, I'm just gonna beat you for pace, even at this stage of my career. And the fact that the first one that he hits went straight over, I was like, wow, this is they've got everything out of this. There was a point, there was a 1-2 Richie Hogan and somebody had very early on, where Richie Hogan has like 3 lads around him, and again it's just a hand pass. It might have been, I can't even remember who it was now, but that was beautiful. And the other thing that we haven't talked about is there was the 2 Fennellys are through 2-on-1 situations twice, first and second half, and little brother tries to find big brother both times, and you're like, Colin, what are you doing? Just do it yourself. Just go for it. You're the killer.
Yeah, like it definitely completely cocks up that one in the first half anyway, where he just completely scuffs it along the ground. But let's not forget, Lar had a similar opportunity in the second half where he actually turns away from goal.
And hits it back,
as clear cut as Colin Fennelly, and he hits it backwards. A lot of strange things happened. Like I think Colin Fennelly, a couple of moments in the first half, definitely fluffed his lines to a certain degree. But just on Lar, like I didn't appreciate, or perhaps it's just like a hazy memory, didn't remember how good Lar was in this game, to the point where you kind of look at Lar's legacy post 2010 and you think to yourself, you remember one thing, and that is following Tommy Walsh around. Like that, when you think about post 2010, you think about that, and that is the one thing.
This is after that. Like
yeah,
this,
exactly.
This amazing performance in an All-Ireland final where, you know, like he was in consideration, certainly in the conversation for, maybe he's not in conversation for man of the match, but he played really, really well, unbelievably effective, and this should be his legacy.
Yes, but like this is a proof of history getting written by the winners in the end. Like this should have been a celebration of Lar Corbett. If that is like an inch lower or an inch to the right, either direction really, it's back at the net, and perhaps this is a very different outcome. We're talking about Lar Corbett, the renaissance of Lar Corbett, being around Tipperary for whatever 15 years, and has finally put another crowning glory. You can forget about him following Tommy Walsh around. 2010 and 2014 is all we need to use to remember Lar Corbett by, and it is the width of a post that stops us remembering him. Thus, it's cruel, but it is sport. I thought he was sensational, but I'd forgotten about it. Sorry, go on, John.
Yeah, history does rewrite things. Now, history's rewriting Kilkenny and Tipperary since that 2014 series, because Tipperary hammered Kilkenny by 9 points 2 years later, and then they beat them by 14 points last year. So you're thinking to yourself, I remember at the time thinking, Eamon O'Shea, what does he need to do, as Ger was saying earlier on, to win All Ireland? Because I think he was such a pure hurling man, and the way the game should be played, not with sweepers, this and that, as a rule, it should be played with beautiful freedom and complete artistry, and that's what Eamon O'Shea espoused. And it's funny, like looking at Michael Ryan beside Eamon O'Shea on the sideline, and he would lead Tipperary 2 years later, and Eamon O'Shea's back with Liam Sheedy last year, and he just loves hurling, and just as much as Brian Cody as well. But it's funny, like I remember that year thinking to myself, Kilkenny have done it again. The boa constrictor came out in the replay, and they just suffocated Tipperary. And you're thinking, like last year, the previous year, it was 2013, that Tipperary lost to Kilkenny in the qualifiers. 2012, the Lar Corbett game. And funnily now, you're thinking of Tipperary and the ascendancy. So it's only when history moves on and years move on that you have a little bit of a different picture than you had at the time. Because at the time, my picture was Kilkenny are just one of these teams that are just the Terminator. You can never, ever defeat them. And then I don't think Kilkenny would have won the All-Ireland the next year, 2015, which is when I went on Twitter and did the Bart Simpson thing, where Bart Simpson, there's a kind of a black and white photo of Bart Simpson, like, you know, completely slumped in the chair when they beat Galway. And you're thinking, oh, this has happened again, because that was their 11th All-Ireland for Cody. The 2014 one was the one for 10. And the one thing we haven't spoken about yet was that Henry Shefflin was on the bench for the whole game, came on, had no impact, because by that time I think the game had seen him through, and Henry, because everybody was playing so well, didn't get a chance.
Didn't touch the ball, really.
Yeah.
Let's talk Hawkeye. It's been so well documented down through the years. This is not the thing that people forget about when the years pass, and it's almost 6 years since this All-Ireland final. Like, the one thing I had forgotten was actually the very first effort of the game. Colin Fennelly called Hawkeye into play, incorrectly ruled wide before Hawkeye corrected it for a point for Kilkenny. So there was a nice top and tail, a nice symmetry to this game provided by Hawkeye.
There was. I don't think this is the Hawkeye final, to be honest, because like the ball was wide, the right thing happened, the replay was the right result because Bubbles didn't actually score that free. That's like, I'm alone in this, I understand.
rephrase this. You are blaming this. Of course, you're blaming this on Bubbles Dwyer because he went a couple of inches to the right.
Yeah, but like, I mean, it was too far out. Shouldn't have been a free. It would have been a great injustice if that had been the winning of the game. And
he nailed one from inside of 65 in the first
half.
Seconds
He
of the
did,
game.
yeah, he did.
It's perfect sort of range. It's it's Stephen Jones 2009 sort of vibes about it. It's like if you have this at any other point in the game, he probably makes it. But it's just that it is to decide the whole thing. It perhaps wavers your accuracy a little bit.
Maybe. Can I also just point out that there was 1 minute of additional time at the end of the game, and there was 6 subs. Like the whole, we have a minute of additional time here, the sides are level, and then it was like straight over. Because I was thinking when the time was up, it was like 69-47 or whatever, and you're like, oh well, how is this the end of the game? Because there's surely going to be about 4 or 5 minutes of stoppage time. There wasn't.
Yeah.
And at least they're going to let something else happen after this. But no, that was it. 1 minute, and that was he took the full minute. There was, I think, probably 2 subs made in between the awarding of the free and people coming on, and that was it. So look, it is incredible drama, but the right outcome, because the ball was wide, was that it went to a replay.
For sure, there's no question.
It was shocking watching it back last night. There was only 1 minute of additional time, and I'm thinking to myself, was there another chance after the Hawkeye moment? And I think actually this was it. But I do remember being there, and I counted it. It took 30 seconds from the time Bubbles hit it until the time the decision was made, and it took 15 seconds from the time the umpire went and did the square. And fair play, because umpires get really badly maligned in Gaelic games, and the guy made the right call to send it to Barry Kelly to say that it would be a Hawkeye decision. And then it took 15 seconds from the umpire making the call for the decision to be made. And one thing that the replay doesn't get is that 82,000 people looked at a screen at Croke Park to decide the All-Ireland final. And that, to me, had never happened before. And everybody, it was just a gasping for breath moment. And then you see miss come up on the screen. And that was just utter, the best crescendo you could have had to the best hurling game I've ever seen. And to me, that's why I would always remember it as the Hawkeye final, would be my view. It was just like being there, and everybody's cocking their heads towards one area in the ground and looking at a screen and going, it has all come down to this. All these months of training, all the winter nights, everything has come down to a screen deciding fate. It's like one of these game shows. And that to me was, for the Gaelic Athletic Association, as I said, that they couldn't get their timekeeping right in 1998, had to have it like this. Really just showed, like, it just felt so modern even watching it last night, and it was 6 years ago.
If Tipp had won it with that free, would they have deserved to win it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think they would. I think they were the better team on the day. And I think that Kilkenny kept in it because of the goals they scored. But Tipperary didn't get the second chance, and Kilkenny were the better team in the replay. But I think for a spectacle, the way when I wrote about this on offtheball.com last year, when I was talking about the best hurling games I've almost seen, they almost shouldn't have shared the All-Ireland that year. They should have, got a saw out, an electric saw, cut the Liam McCarthy Cup in half, obviously one of the replica ones, and given it to each team and said, you know what, that's the greatest thing we've ever seen. We can share this. We just say it's a shared match, and we'll have another go at it next season. It was so. I don't think. How can I say this that makes any logical sense? Kilkenny didn't deserve to lose it, but Tipperary deserved to win it.
Let's face it, they would have 100% added on the time for checking Hawkeye and waiting for Bubbles to take the free and a substitute had the ball gone over the bar. Like, they would have 100% found an extra 60 seconds to allow Kilkenny to get down the other. This was always destined.
Just put this out on top of Richie Hogan there. He'll stick it over. We'll all go home. It'll be a draw. Everybody's going to be happy.
This was the third replay in a row. They knew the lavish lifestyle that could be enjoyed on a countrywide basis as a GA man if you could let this go to a second day. We need to get on to secret man of the match. We've covered a lot of this already. Really, we've gone through a lot of the protagonists. Richie Hogan was actual man of the match. As I said at the top, he goes from midfield to centre forward, has a huge huge impact in the second half of the game. When I'm looking through the secret men of the match here, there is more Tipp men that I've picked out, certainly, than Kilkenny men. Like, Ger, you've already mentioned Paddy Stapleton. I think that he has to be up there with a shout for man of the match on this occasion. Very lucky to not get sent off. But outside of that, one of the better defensive performances on the day. Also gets a score at the other end. And Cathal Barrett in the other corner. Sensational. But I think it possibly just has to be Seamus Callanan, doesn't it? Just for the sustained excellence throughout the 70 minutes.
Did you notice Duggan says there's been this thing about Callanan that he doesn't perform on the big occasion? That's really unfair. And I'm like, well, I didn't know that. I didn't realize that there was this kind of sense that, Seamus Callanan somehow is a bottler. Like, what? Who? And how wrong was that? When you're looking at this now, obviously, from him having fulfilled a hurler of the year, like, carried the weight of expectation, having come back from some serious injuries, you're like, wow. But Callan's first touch is electric. He goes in a slaloming solo run, comes out to kind of left half forward position and just gets it and burns. And you're like, all right, he's at it today. And so I was absolutely thrilled to see him play really well. I thought Bubbles was sensational. He's 22.
Yeah. How secret does it need to be, though? And how secret do you need to be a secret man of the match?
Someone that's not Richie Hogan.
Bubbles Dwyer, obviously. Like, I know he missed the free, and I know he missed a penalty, but the rest of his play, every time he got the ball from crazy angles from everywhere, it was over the bar. He got the equalising score, and he scored 7 points, 5 from play. If it's not Richie Hogan, it's Bubbles. But it depends how secret we're getting and how nuanced we're getting about it. But the obvious one was Bubbles in my mind.
I'll take Bubbles. I've got him down here as well. Well, one of the things in terms of personnel and looking, you mentioned Seamus Callanan, and looking back from the year 2020 in terms of how that take on Seamus Callanan being a bottler is just so completely off the mark. We also look at it from our current vantage point and look at Bonner Maher and how brilliant he was at certain intervals in the game. How on earth did Tipperary manage to win an All-Ireland last year without this guy? Like, it's one of the forgotten themes of the 2019 hurling summer, the loss of Bonner Maher, and still Tipperary being the best team in the country, quite simply. Yeah, and how hopefully, if hurling returns this year, that we get to see him play a big role, because he really deserves it. But there was one point where Eamon O'Shea runs in and talks to Darren Gleeson, and he's basically saying, hit Bonner with the puck outs. No more short. The short puck outs worked really well for them in that first half. There was one that went awry, and then they went away from it totally, and just lorried ball on top of Bonner, and he was absolutely sensational for the rest of that first half. Now, in the second half, Kilkenny got to grips with it a little bit, and it didn't work as much. So absolutely sensational. I thought Lar, I would have had in my shout for secret man of the match, but I thought that there was any number of the Kilkenny forwards who could have had it. Richie Power scores 2 goals in an All-Ireland final. Yeah. Both of them are absolutely beautiful in different ways. One of them is just the poacher's instinct. The other one is pure balance and running and just the ability to... And the other thing about the second goal is that there's an amazing bit of play from Michael Fenley where a ball breaks and he dribbles past 3 lads and hits this perfect ball up to the forward line. And that was him coming into the game in the midfield role, as opposed to not being able to get into the game as much as he was in the first half. Although maybe if the brother hits him with a better pass, he scores the goal and everybody goes, what a great performance that was. So, but I thought he was definitely a contender for man of the match. I don't think Owen Larkin in any way faded in the second quarter. In the second half, he wasn't as amazing, but I thought he was sensational in that first half. Like, he would have been right there for man of the match in the first half. And ironically enough, Richie Hogan's first half wasn't anywhere near as good as the second half. So those switches clearly worked and he found a bit more space. TJ Reid played really well. Really, really well.
1-8, scored a Gerard Muller goal that out of the blue that once again changed the narrative and the tide in the second half, the first score of the second half, and how the players would need to fill themselves up again to go again. No, that they're never going to shake this Kilkenny team off their backs. Scored the last Kilkenny point. And it's funny, I think we all saw in the following year how TJ Reid would become hurler of the year, that he was so crucial to Kilkenny. So he was definitely up there for me as one of the players of the match.
Let's get into some of the trends from the game. I think it's not, and when we get into most jarring moments as well, there's not a whole pile of them because it is not exactly prehistoric, this game. It's fairly notable in the memory. Some of the things that kind of stuck out to me, obviously, in terms of trending, the Anthony Nash rule was the big trend of the summer. Hawkeye was very much on vogue. And another thing was that this is obviously something that's been around hurling for a long time, but I think it was particularly strong the summer of 2014, was that no matter what position your body was in or what way your body was turned, a point was always on. It was this stage where, okay, Seamus Callanan has the ball by the sideline at an unbelievably acute angle. He is going for a point here, and it will probably go over the bar. This idea of Richie Power before he scored his goal, knocked over an amazing point from the sideline. And I mean that, and I choose that verb very deliberately, knocked over the ball from the sideline. This is what the hurlers were doing at this point. We had reached the peak of skill output in this game, and the over-the-shoulder by the sideline point was very much trending. Like, John, you've already touched on some of the things that certainly jarred, like Shefflin being on the periphery, not really having much to do whatsoever when he came on. It's just always jarring because it is Henry Shefflin, despite the fact that it is 2014. None of the Welchers from Tullerone being centrally involved as well. A little bit jarring when you look back at a great Kilkenny team.
Porrick comes off the bench. Porrick comes off the bench and starts the replay.
Yeah, exactly. But in this moment, in the first game, no real, not a huge amount of input. And Lara kind of jarred at me as well. I just forgotten how good he was in 2014. I'm not sure what stuck out to you, lads.
I think that, this Kilkenny team is still has enough of the great players playing well. It's not Henry Shefflin's team anymore. It's Richie Hogan's team. It's TJ Reid's team. We're definitely getting towards the end of Jackie Tyrrell and getting towards the end of JJ Delaney, but they're still young enough to be really important players and to be able to have good games, even though the defence ends up conceding whatever, 120, whatever. They were still key players, and they were still making blocks, and they were still making tackles and hooks, and this is so the next year is obviously the last time that Kilkenny win All Ireland, and that's the end of that great team, even though some of them are still playing up to now. We should appreciate this was the greatest team of all time. That's the whole point about this Kilkenny team. They were the greatest hurling team of all time, and there's enough of them around in this match for that to be the same team.
Yeah, and I think that it is not necessarily the best Kilkenny team of that era, but it still had enough quality in it to get the job done through the goals they scored in the game, the 9 points they scored through goals. And the best Kilkenny team was probably 2008. This is 6 years later. And it just shows how single-minded Brian Cody was and is, that Henry Shefflin, to me, produced the best ever performance I've ever seen in the Galway game 2 years previously. They won the replay handily, and then he's not involved 2 years later in a final. When you think sentiment would suggest that, we'll put Henry in, it's his 10th All-Ireland, sentiment doesn't come into one iota. Kieran Joyce comes in for the replay at centre-back and wins man of the match, and they go man-on-man in the replay. Nothing really jarred, to be honest. How can you say, if you're going to go and make a statement like Moses and the Commandments that this is the greatest hurling game I've ever seen, and even feeling last night that my judgment in my own mind was on the ball, of course, people will say that other matches were just as good. But for me, I think it was just the freedom and the kind of the naive beauty of it.
Yes.
What jars for me in hurling is sometimes all these tactics and this and that, where this was the game played the way it should be played. And you're all these talking about black cards and all these kind of things. This to me was just pure freedom. Pure freedom. It was like something from mythology, from Cuchulainn or Satanta or something like that. It was just, if you were going to give the tape or bring anybody from outside of Ireland to a hurling game, give them a ticket, give them a day out for a few drinks or whatever and a meal, and you say, okay, we're going to go to something amazing today. This is the day, the sunny weather, the end-to-end, the controversy, the penalties, the Hawkeye, the two great teams. It is the most quintessential essence of Irishness that I can see this day. So how can I say that anything jars when I'm looking at that? I'm describing that now.
That's a very interesting point you make, John, because we've all been, maybe it's just me, but we've all been in that position where, we're at a pub chatting to a few Americans who've come to town and they're asking about hurling and they're like, what is this game? What is this crazy warrior sport? And, you do the thing where you go on YouTube and you're really proud of hurling when you're Googling it. This is actually the game that comes up first if you just Google hurling. I think, or at least it used to be last time I'd engaged in such an activity like showing an American a video of hurling. And if you actually go into the comments on YouTube, all the comments are from people around the world saying, how have I not seen this game before? This is incredible. So it seems that this is almost the first ad you get for hurling whenever you look at it online. And you're right, it is I'm not sure do I agree with you in the point that like this is the way hurling should be played. I think you can play hurling in whatever game, in whatever way you deem is fit. But I think this was the natural next step for hurling, wasn't it? After this moment, it was going to be sweepers, it was going to be defensive systems. Sorry, Ger, but I just think that this is the moment where we saw pure flowing hurling at its peak, and there was always going to be a change. There was going to be an alteration. I'm not saying the game has got worse. I think the last couple of seasons have been incredible.
Yeah,
but there was always going to be a change after.
Clare won the All-Ireland the year before, so and they obviously had sweepers under Davy Fitz. So I don't think this is the sweepers are reacting to this. Can I just actually make the counter argument though that the 2 penalties, if there'd been a black card for either of those, it would have swung the game, and it would have given the attacker the option of scoring a goal, which actually I think that, I just think that there is definitely room for this game to improve. That Tipperary created those goal chances, and key defenders would have ended up being off the field for 10 minutes if we had a sin bin, for example, or being replaced for the entire game if the black card was in. It's obviously never coming in hurling. It's not going to happen. But I do feel like you could professionally foul in the game at that point, and it's a weakness. It is a weakness of the game that there's no punishment for it, because you end up getting 3 amazing shot stoppers on the line for penalties, and that did jar for me a little bit.
Yeah, it's a fair point. It's a fair point. Now it's now just the goalie now, and I think it was just the forwards were at a disadvantage with the way the reaction towards against the Nash, the way he was taking penalties, and there was nothing wrong with the way he was taking penalties, just taking it the way he was, or people were feeling that it was dangerous at the time. But yeah, so I do think Tipperary were actually at disadvantage by that, and it is unfortunate they didn't win that All Ireland. It really is, but history will now say that they won the 16 and the 20 finals. And comfortably. So I don't think the psychological scars are there from that. One thing as well, I was very lucky enough to get a ticket the following year, the 2015 final, right at the sideline, like literally behind Anthony Cunningham from Galway. And I was in the seat behind him. So effectively I was in the dugout. And one thing you don't see when you're up in the stands is how quick this thing moves on ground level. It is ridiculous. It's hard to get your mind to process it, really, how quickly everything moves, and how instinctive the whole thing is. And this was not a good game, Kilkenny beating Galway, not a good match. Galway were great in the first half but didn't turn up in the second half, and even to be Brian Cody or Eoin Sheahan on that day, to see this, I'd say, from ground level was something else. And to be able to make decisions then in real time. Yeah. These guys are good. These guys are talented at making decisions in real time. And they've no, like back in the day when George Graham in the 80s when Arsenal would be up in the director's box, there's nobody in their ear. They're able to make these decisions in real time. And one thing I don't think people understand is sometimes the speed of the way this thing moves. And the speed of this game, the flow was Niagara Falls flow, pulsating, Mad Max stuff, crazy stuff, and great stuff.
Just one of the last points I want to make is that this game has completely reevaluated rewatching this game has completely reevaluated how I've looked at this Kilkenny team. Like, I had this completely wrong view in my head that, Brian Cody coming to do back-to-back in 2014, 2015 is right up there as one of his greatest ever managerial achievements. And it is a great achievement to come back and do back-to-back All-Irelands in any year, of course it is. But this is still an unbelievably good Kilkenny team. I had it in my head that they were all past it, that you had people playing well beyond the hill and all that sort of thing. Not the case. This Kilkenny team is outstanding. Tipperary played out of their skin in this drawn game in 2014 and could not beat them. And I think that sums up this Kilkenny team. It is why they came back. To win the replay, it is why they came back the following year to win this All-Irelands. And like doing back-to-backs there, it is fantastic. But it is almost something you might expect of a team packed with talent like this Kilkenny team was. The final thing we just need to do, lads, before we wrap this morning is just give this an underrated or overrated. I'm going to go first, and I think it's just absurd if anybody can say this thing is overrated. Can anybody make a case that this is overrated?
Nah.
No.
I did see somebody else saying that this was too much like an exhibition match. Somebody was tweeting us yesterday saying, I've always found, says Gareth Cummins here, I've always found the 09 final where Kilkenny won the 4 in a row the best I've ever seen. It had everything. Tipp were heroic in defeat. PJ Ryan was man of the match. That game in 14, as good as it was like the opening of a pitch. Too open. The game in 09 was far more intense. I think that was pretty intense yesterday, Gareth. I'd watch that again. I mean, I see there's a sensibility there where Certainly the Kilkenny defenders thought they were too open and went man for man in the replay, and we're like, that's not how it does again. And that, you know, maybe that's where you're getting this from with Gareth, but I don't agree.
No, absolutely not. It's underrated for me, John.
Underrated, and I don't think underrated or overrated. It's just the best. And once again, I'll say no wides between the 44th minute and the 72nd minute. And I'm almost, because I knew that, I was waiting to see how were there no wides, and there were no wides. There's great clearances, the Paddy Stapletons. There was, you know, sidelines. There was this and that, and it was just quality. It's, you know, the quality mark. You know, that Q mark or the sign they put on a product. You know, they just. The fact that it went to Hawkeye just, to me, makes it just so special, and that it does stand out as in the annals of time. People will always have their favourites, but this one for me stood out. And as well, don't forget, lads, it was a final. It wasn't a Munster game that you could have a second chance in. It was a final. It was the Lee McCarthy Cup in the stand on the line.
Yeah, absolutely. That is pretty much us for this morning, Ger. We're going to hand back to you in studio, but get in touch at Off the Ball if you've got any shouts for Classic Game Clubs. TG Cahir showing a lot of good stuff over the courses of these few weekends, it seems. So you can watch the full thing back on YouTube if you're just joining us, and it was on TG Cahir, as I said yesterday.
John, good stuff. Owen, before I let you go, the most important piece of advice that we got over the weekend was sung to the tune of O Ro Sheda Bahawalya.
Is that right? I saw you putting in this tweet there yesterday. Actually, how does it go?
O Ro, stay the fuck a while, yeah. O Ro, stay the fuck a while, yeah. O Ro. You were supposed to join in at that point.
Because I don't know the words.
Come on, you don't know the words to O Ro, Sheda Bahawalya.
Well, O Ro, and then what's the next line? You can't just repeat that for 4 lines, can you?
You do 3 of them.
Oh, and live the fucking lava.
Need a fucking lava.
Oh, okay, there you go. There, like that's pretty poor. I don't know. I'm just thinking what it might be.
No, that was it. That was it. You were right.
Okay, great, fantastic. Well, there you go. There's your tune. If you are thinking of not washing your hands this morning, think of that tune.
When in doubt, seek the wisdom of your elders. The old Irish songs are the best. O Ro, stay the fuck a while, yeah. O Ro, stay the fuck a while, yeah. O Ro, stay the fuck a while, yeah. August need a fucking lava. Apologies for any of the young ears that might have heard that. But, you know, they need to hear it too. How do you feel about the fact that the millennials are getting all the blame here, Owen?
Well, as I was saying earlier on, it's you can't actually pin this whole thing down. Like, was it just millennials in the best shots queue yesterday in Howth?
I think it might just have been millennials in Temple Bar, though. That was the bit where you guys got your bad rep.
Yeah, it's true, and there is one sec. Let me just. There was one tweet that I saw yesterday, which was certainly entertaining. Sorry, it was from somebody called Adeli Barbosa. He says, "To everyone calling us selfish for going out during lockdown, you're just jealous because your mum won't let you out." Saw that.
Like 9 million likes. All right, fair enough, because your ma won't let you out. Right, well, we're all allowed out. We're going to keep producing top quality sports content for you forever, it turns out. If you've got anything you'd like us to cover, you can get in touch with us by WhatsApp. 087 9 180 180 is the number to send your videos to. And remember, if you're sending us videos, do please turn the phone around, do it landscape, not portrait. Every day at 12 o'clock, Richie's Isolation Mix, top tunes on OTB Sports Radio, as picked by our own music maestro, Richie McCormack. Every day at noon, it's to remind you to, you know, put down the scrolling news, listen to some good music, get a little bit of fresh air if you possibly can. Off the couch at 1 o'clock on all of our social channels across OTB, so you'll get it on Instagram, you'll get it on Facebook, you'll get it on YouTube and Twitter as well. Every day we're going to give you some exercise at 1 o'clock, and the AM podcast is available wherever you get your podcast. Best place, of course, is the Go Loud app or offtheball.com. Richie McCormack's Isolation Mix. Remember to take a break from working from home. Stick the mix on at midday, get some fresh air, take a walk, while remembering to keep your 2-metre social distance every day at midday. And one thing on tonight, I should let you know, Simon Zebo talking about lockdown in Paris, Kieran McGean talking about the Olympic Games, and the football show coming your way from 7 o'clock. This morning we had Kelly Harrington